Okay friends, it's time to get started on replacing our neutral safety switch. That's going to be located on the driver's side of the transmission. You're going to find your shifter linkage that leads directly to the armature. We're going to pop the linkage off of the armature. I'll use my pry bar, carefully get in between this area and gently separate it. Now let's continue on with the 21mm wrench. We're going to come right over to the mounting nut that holds the armature to the transmission shaft. Now as I turn this counterclockwise, you're going to notice that the armature wants to spin a little bit, and that's okay. It's going to stop at some point. Go ahead and fully unscrew this mounting nut. As you remove your mounting hardware, make sure you give it a close inspection. If it needs to be replaced, now's the time to do it. Now we can grab the armature from the assembly here. We'll just go ahead and wiggle it and pop it off of there. Give it a quick inspection, set it aside. Now we're going to continue on trying to remove the wiring from the back side of the neutral safety switch. Approximately where my screwdriver is, there's a push tab. Go ahead and squeeze that in and then pop the wiring off. Once you have it off of there, continue on by inspecting it for corrosion. That looks fine. Now the next thing you want to do is pay attention to the angle of the neutral safety switch. The reason why that's important is because that's how you make an adjustment. If I was to remove both of these bolts, this will be able to pivot. So of course, when I put on the brand new one, I want to try to have it in pretty much the same exact position. Now you can either mark this with a marker or even just kind of eyeball it, but generally once you start removing the bolts, you'll be able to see exactly where the bolt head was on the original neutral safety switch. When we put the new one on, we'll try to line it back up into the original position, snug the bolts. Now looking at this one, it seems as though it's pretty much directly in the center of this hole. If not, maybe a little closer to the top. This one's in the center / closer to the bottom. Now we're going to carefully try prying this off of the shaft. It's common for the plastic area to be stuck on there, especially if there's any type of rust or corrosion on the shaft. Go ahead and spray that with a little bit of penetrant, and then we're going to carefully make our way behind this and gently pry up against the transmission pan. Be extremely careful not to damage the pan or the transmission itself. Just going to work my way back and forth here. There it is, friends. Now the next thing we want to do is clean and inspect the shaft coming out of the transmission. You also want to pay attention to the seal in between the shaft and the transmission itself. If it looks like there's transmission fluid coming out and down this area, generally it's due to that seal. Now would be a great time to replace that. Now once you have this cleaned up, continue on by inspecting the shaft closely. You're going to find that you have two slots on it. One down here where my index finger is, and one directly across from it. Now once you've found those and inspected it to make sure they're free and clear of any debris, continue on with a little bit of lubricant. This is going to help make sure that we can slide that neutral safety switch on fairly easily without damaging it in any way. Okay friends, now it's time to install our brand new neutral safety switch. let's look directly in the hole of the neutral safety switch. You're going to find that you have two little pitons that protrude out into the hole. Of course, those are the areas that need to line up with the corresponding slots on the shaft. As we start putting this on, make sure you have the wiring facing towards the rear. We're just going to go ahead and carefully start wiggling this around until it feels as though those line up with their corresponding holes. Now I'm going to go ahead and slide this on here. As I'm pressing, I'm trying to press on the white area, not necessarily the black area, because I don't want to flex it too much and damage it. I only want to press in from the center. All right, so now that I'm at the point where I'm starting to press this on here and it feels as though it wanted to stop, I'm going to continue on with an 18mm socket. I'm going to put it right over only the white area here. I'll use a very small hammer and I'm going to give it a couple loving bonks just to drive it in until this is completely pressed up against the transmission. Now when I do this, I'm being very careful not to apply any force to this shaft right here because it could potentially cause internal transmission damage. If you have to hit really hard, more than likely something's bound or damaged in some way. The next thing we want to do is continue on with our lever. It's a good idea to make sure you clean up the area that goes onto the shaft that comes out of the transmission. Do both sides. Also, the area right here that the cable goes onto, go ahead and clean that up as well. Now we're going to go ahead and put this on the shaft coming out of the transmission. Looking at it, you can tell it's not a perfect oval, it has some flat sides. The shaft, also not a perfect oval, has flat notches. Go ahead and line it up. That right on there. Now I'll continue putting on my nut. We'll snug it up. Now once it starts feeling as though it's snugging up to the point it wants to turn the shaft, go ahead and hold on to that armature with some pliers. Essentially, I want to make sure that this can't turn while I'm tightening it, especially once it feels like it's snugged and I try to give it that little extra. I don't want to go ahead and damage the transmission in any way. Now that I have it bottomed out, I'm going to continue holding it and I'm going to torque that nut to 35 foot-pounds. Once again, be extremely careful not to break the shaft on your transmission. Now the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and line up our neutral safety switch. Once again, when we were removing the original, I told you to pay attention to exactly where each of these bolts go. Before you put them in there, just go ahead and give the threads a quick inspection, make sure they're clean and free of any debris or rust. We'll start each of them in by hand. Once they're in by hand, go ahead and pivot this to its position that you want it in, and then go ahead and snug them up. Now we'll torque these to 89 inch-pounds. Now we can start reconnecting our cable. Go ahead and line it up and then gently press it on there. Listen for a click and then give it a tug. Essentially, I'm trying to pull it off. I want to make sure that it's not going to fall off while I'm driving down the road. Let's continue on to the wiring. Go ahead and line it up, slide it in, listen for a click. There's our click. I'm going to give it a tug, trying to pull it out of there. That feels secure. Okay friends, the neutral safety switch is physically installed up against the transmission. Now the next thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and climb out from under the vehicle, put it in park, and try starting it. Assuming it starts, go ahead and turn it off. Put it in neutral. Try starting it. Assuming it starts, you should be good to go. If it does not want to start in either of those positions, you have to go ahead and make sure you make your way back under here, loosen each of your 8mm headed bolts, and turn this. If you're off by your adjustment, it's going to cause an issue where you can't start the vehicle. Assuming it starts, you're good to go. Thanks for watching.